I just love that it tells me that I'm live. Isn't that great? Let's see. I'm not Annie. But if you're here, it doesn't look like anybody's quite here yet. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and... Still getting ready. This is my first time being back at the studio in so long. Somebody's here on the internet. Let me know who you are if you chat. Who you are, that you're here. Mm-hmm. Hello. I'm good. Come on in. Oops, there's my bowl. So if you're online, and we're just beginning to gather, I think it's already 7. Oh, it's almost 7:30. If you're online, let me know that I'm audible. I don't have the mic. It should be clipped. Let's see. There you go. Hi, Annie. Yeah, so filling in for Annie Moyer this weekend, this evening. This evening. Annie's a little under the weather, so she will, I hope she's feeling much better to have the evening off. Oh, it's so awesome to be back in the studio. What is your name? Musa? Yeah. I've met you before. Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah, welcome. So make sure as we're gathering that we just set up a space that feels really supported. Two kinds of intelligence. That's the theme for tonight. Marla, so good to see you. And Musa, Annie says hello. I guess Annie's listening from home and participating. Pardon? She's saying hi, Musa. Yeah. Oh, so yeah, she can't see on. It's not Zoom. It's YouTube. So, Marla, so good to be together. Thank you, Marla, for your thinking of me, holding me close. So it's 7:31. I'll give another minute to us setting up. And two kinds of intelligence. If you're familiar with Rumi's poem of that name, I'll be reading it in a little bit. And I have some really favorite Rumi poems. I bet you also do. But there are really very few that I am familiar with. I am sort of a person, especially in the last few years, of reading less and just really ruminating and digesting, taking it in to my being, taking what I learn in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and have us start tonight. My name is aLex Levin. I'm here for Annie Moyer for the usual Wednesday evening meditation and Dharma talk. And I do a Sunday YouTube that's my style, a little different. The format tonight will be a bit of a centering, and then I'll talk a little bit about my theme. I'll read Rumi's poem, and then we'll do a little practice. I forget what Annie calls them, mind exercises, something like that. Something where we chew on the theme a little. And the themes in my mind, the themes are things that help us toward that unnameable that we're trying to tap into and recognize more fully when we meditate. So, and then after that practice, we'll just segue into a more quiet, a less ruminating on anything, and just the meditation, which I consider moving more and more close to stillness, silence, and spaciousness. So thanks for being here. So settling, I'd like to start with a bell, and I'll talk you lightly through your posture choices. And this will be about 8 minutes or so sitting. So you might notice for yourself how the bell may feel like a call to practice and help us in that transition. And if it feels right for you, we often end our practice with a bow, but I also begin my meditation practice, even when I'm by myself, by bringing my hands in front of my heart, palm to palm, and bowing. And if you're seated, that was possible. If you're lying down, which is completely fine, that was also possible in a way. Whatever shape you're in, make it conscious, chosen. And so important as we dive toward that knowing of the absolute, that we feel supported. So your support comes from so many things, but very tangibly from the cushions or seat, the floor. I especially use the code word ground for this first, really settling toward stillness. And coming in through the body, meaning gently, lightly, our attention comes to sense any of the physical sensations, maybe from having had dinner, from driving here, from rushing about in the day, to the actuality of the feel of our bottoms, our legs, our feet. This attention to the body here in this space that we're in. Some of us here together at the Sun and Moon Studio, some of you at home. Verifying, I am here. And the second code word I use is sound. And as you heard me say the word sound, notice for yourself how sounds might help you orient to where your center is, your being, your presence, your physical presence. And these comings and goings I hear a sort of staticky hum of the computer and something over to the right of me, some sounds over to the left of me. And when we again just lightly open to following how the sound arrives right here, seemingly from outside to in. This really represents the whole space around. This constant dynamic exchange. So ground was the first, and that one includes, it's a sort of a vertical sense that really helps sense our presence right here, that is connected to the closest thing to now. And it has its a complementary up to the down. So there's this gravitational pull down and there's this levity upward. And that force also then relates to that second word, sound and spaced around. That gravitational force is also like a grid that's all around. And we might even feel supported by that horizontally as well as vertically. And perhaps you notice as we're using all these landmarks, so to speak, to arrive right here, you might already be sensing the quiet, boundless essence that never changes. And the third pointer that I use, the last one that I frequently use, these three, ground, sound. The third is breath. Without doing a thing, we can fold in awareness of breath. In a way similar to the exchange of sound, it seems to be coming in and moving out. And yet different as breath seems to carry the life force, or vice versa, the life force carries breath. And even if we're very, very still, deeply silent, the pulse of life is never gone. And before we come out of this beginning meditation together, I invite you to sense and look for, gently, just let it come to you, how you feel a sense of being safe. Words are okay, sensations are even better, like physical sensations, than the words about them. And often several words together is helpful. And I'll give you a hot off the press example of what's happening here. The first part of this little practice is to really just listen. If you think you know right away, that's okay, but usually there's more. So listen in that feeling, looking in, all the sensory way, and with your senses open like satellite dishes. And just let all the ways that you feel safe come to you. And I'll just verbalize what's coming here now is a very solid, warm ground blanket. And something about just this familiarity of this room, this town, my long years living here, the community I'm part of, my friends and family. I might boil that down to familiar longevity, solidity. And as I hear those words, even though they're sort of strange together, do they reflect what I'm sensing as this feeling of safety? Or would I modify them just a little or a lot? Long-term, familiar stability. See what words may come for you. And how those words correspond to what you actually feel, maybe in your heart or throat or belly. you'd like, you can open your eyes or move around out of the stillness of sitting. So I actually took you into a little kind of practice. I separate them, but they're really overlapping. That meditation is primarily to really practice that stillness and silence, and even as it's visited by thoughts and itches, and I don't know about you, but my meditations lately have been, oh my gosh, so hard to sit a lot of the times. My meditation, I don't know, I choose it to be about 18 minutes long usually. And something I do, I was talking about the bowing at the beginning. I didn't do it right at the end here, but at the end, we'll all bow together. My teacher also suggested that when you break your meditation, if you feel like you're really transported somewhere, or you move, or that you again just sort of bow again, and just like a starting again, recognizing. And again, as I love how Annie speaks of, and many of our teachers and teachers that I have, is that when we are distracted like that, there's a tendency to almost punish ourselves, give us a timeout for that. And that's really an opportunity of where it's you noticing that I'm paying attention, I'm awake. And it's as we can start to celebrate that more and not berate ourselves, not hold that so tightly, it becomes less of a big deal. And in a sense, the more light we hold all of that, we drop deeper into that. I'll call it the absolute. Use several words for it. So let me read the poem. Do you know this? The two kinds of intelligence, from Rumi. I thought about talking about three kinds of intelligence, but then I realized he's right. We need to talk about two. Three kinds would have been sort of the head intelligence, knowing, learning, memory, heart intelligence of feeling and emotion, and then the sort of more opening, the more gut kind of knowing intelligence. But those are all still, in my mind, all in the realm of changing and doing, and all that changes, all that's not permanent. So these two kinds of knowing, I think, are sort of dropped and broken into the impermanent and the non-changing, the permanent. So Rumi says, there are two kinds of intelligence. One is acquired as a child in school, memorizes facts and concepts from books and from what the teacher says, collecting information from the traditional sciences as well as from the new sciences. With such intelligence, you rise in the world. You get ranked ahead or behind the others in regard to your competence in retaining information. You stroll with this intelligence in and out of fields of knowledge, getting more and more marks on your preserving tablets. There is another kind of tablet, one that is already completed and preserved inside you. A spring overflowing its spring box, a freshness in the center of the chest. This other intelligence does not turn yellow or stagnate. It's fluid, and it doesn't move from outside to inside through the conduits of plumbing learning. This second knowing is a fountainhead from within you, moving out. So in my Sunday meditation this week, last Sunday, my theme was sacrifice. And that word or that idea had been bouncing around for me in the yoga texts. It's a often talked about, or there's stories around that word. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, there's the famous story of Abraham about to sacrifice his son Isaac as he was asked to do by God. And it occurred to me because I had made the example on Sunday that sometimes we think of a sacrifice as something. I guess maybe there's a difference between an offering and a sacrifice. I was confusing those. I was thinking about the offering. I'll repeat the story. It was as I was going to Thailand 14 years ago or so, and I had heard about, or I met a Thai yoga massage person here who had trained over there in the north of Thailand, and we'd be up there, and I thought, well, maybe I can go to where he learned, the school where he was learning. And it was one of those stories where it's not easy to get there. You take a certain bus down this road, and when you see with some parting in the woods and some certain road, you'd pull the bell and get out there and go down the dirt road. And you should bring with you some fruit, some incense, maybe some flowers, and there was a fourth thing. Well, I never ended up going, but there are many such stories where you bring something, and I had thought that's a sacrifice, but I think that's an offering. That's an offering because doesn't sacrifice has the connotation of something it's precious to us, right? Like a son, Abraham's son, that's not easy to give up. So it's occurred to me as I've ruminated on this more lately, and see if this rings true for you. When I'm sitting in meditation and I have thoughts coming to me, and usually there's something I'm planning. Maybe you have your best hits that you play for yourself, or I check my list, or who it is I need to call later, or mostly for me it's a list of things to do. And isn't that, in a sense, I think, and you try this on, this is what we're asked to sacrifice, like, can I let go of these things that are so precious to me? So this practice, this path that we're on, those of us here I know have been doing this a long time, and I love the Feldenkrais's teachings, and it's a kind of another path I'm taking now with some of the learning I'm doing, says that there is no end to improving our movement. And I love that. He's talking about movement, but movement is part of life, and movement of our mind, movement of changes in our mind. So sometimes I feel that I've been on this path so long. Why aren't I getting it the way I want to get it yet? And yet with this idea of that there's no improvement, that it's just, there's always something fresh, that wellspring in us, that never stagnant source is always there. And it's not separate from all these other ways of learning, all these ways of, all the knowledge we've accumulated, all the practices we learn, all the way we learn to make lists, and and all the things that that come to us as we're meditating are kind of valuable, but most valuable when we're able to not push them away or not manage them, but just be in that, drop to that field of absolute, which you may call God or the divine or the infinite. And all those names are not it either. So when we drop to that, what I think Rumi is getting at, that other way of knowing. Many years ago, when I started on this yoga practice, my husband would say something like, that mindfulness sounds like an awful lot of work. And he's kind of like spot on. It does take an effort, but I'm finding, and I'm just delighted that it's unfolding more and more, that it does take this effort, this commitment, this sacrifice to a certain time of practice. But then when you get to receive the gifts of the practice, there is an ease. There is an ease that comes, a peace that comes. And I'm nowhere, I can't always conjure it up right away, but I will also share that I had a event a few days ago. I'm some big changes in my life have happened, some of you know. And I'm starting to have sort of what feels like panic attacks. I don't want to minimize that if it's not quite what it is, but it's not just anxiety, but I feel my body, like my heart kind of shaking. And this last one I had, it's like, I think part of me knew, like, where are all my tools? What's happening? Where's my practice right now? And one of the things I did was sort of a 12-step thing is I picked up the phone and called somebody who could help me, which that was indeed helpful. And it subsided, the physical part. And somehow, I think, when I got to where I was going and interacted with the person who was part of that anxiety, um, I was able to be more like this practice of feeling, where is my body? What's really now? What's in my head? I had spun a bunch of scenarios the night before. This could happen and that's really bad. This could happen and that's really bad. And this could happen and that's really bad. And that's what our mind does. And it's good. All of those things, actually, I'm saying really bad, but they are options that might have to unfold for me in time. There's no hurry. But beyond that, there's so much more. There's so much more possibility. And all of those possibilities were just, they were just small compared to once I met with the person and I realized, oh, part of it is having dialogue with this person and finding out what she needs and what she wants and what's going to happen in the next days and months. So I don't know if that sounds kind of abstract, but I went from that panicky place to just being there, just being with what was in front of me. And so much of that also is caring. So we did this little exercise of feeling how we feel safe, which was going to prepare us for our next little exercise. So whenever we start to invite things that we'd like to see changed or that have been difficulties for us, or the sufferings in our life and how we can handle them, I think it's so primary that we have a sense of how and where we feel safe, psychologically, physically, and that is imbued with a sense of care for ourselves and for whoever, for the situation, that we know how to draw on those resources, is what one of my teachers now calls them, as our resources that help us along. So yeah, so I may invite us to a little different practice, and I thought to include that. So let's, you can actually be not necessarily in a seated position right now. You can be laying down, you can be slouchy. And if you like, you can close your eyes. I'd kind of recommend that. And did it make sense, that kind of feeling a safe sense of safety? And if we can, Eric Schiffman was used this word a lot, felt sense. The sense of not just feeling as in terms of it's got a heart component, it's got a physical component, it's got kind of a mind component. It's very integrated. So this practice will be about 7 or 8 minutes. And so truly, you can just be in any position, doesn't have to be a meditation position. So this is something where, again, sort of find a sense of being supported well, of being comfortable. Tap back into that safety, which might have a different flavor for you now. It might show up for you in a bit of a different way. It's really helpful to keep knowing that our things show up freshly, that, again, as the poem says, even though that absolute, it's always there, but how it shows up for us, it's freeing if we can look for what's fresh, what's new. So what's safe for me, and I was on the brink of this narrating it for you earlier, but it's almost like this warm pit in my stomach that knows my connectedness, knows my resources, knows some continuity. And then we'll invite a couple different things here, three more things, and then come back to some of them. So next, once you've got that feel of safety, and if you need, just stay there longer, and it's really helpful to give it, like I said, usually 2 or 3 words at least, or even more at first. And then once you have that one felt, identified, remember or bring to mind a way that you show care to somebody who's really, really easy. It could be an animal, a pet. It could be a niece, a nephew, a brother or sister. Somebody who's super, super easy to be with, and they don't need anything. They don't need you to feed them dinner. They don't need anything. They just that you want, that you know, just from the fullness of your heart, for your love for them, this being. And you might imagine yourself, like me, stroking my cat's head. She really likes kind of be scritched on them between her ears on the top there. And so imagine that way that you express care for this being, so that you visualize it as if it's happening right here, right present. And then, as we did with the safety, envision how the felt sense of that is present in your experience right here. Does it make you feel like, so I'll just throw out some possibilities, but verify, check inside through your senses. And it might be that there's a feeling of a fullness of heart, a feeling of easy connectedness. And as you say the words to yourself, kind of verify them with the body knowing. So do they ring true? Does it need to be refined a little bit? And when you're ready, we'll leave that one aside. So we've identified a felt sense of safety, a felt sense of what caring, what our care as it moves outward, and what it feels like in our own being. And now bring to Technicolor in your own mind's eye something from your history, perhaps as a young child, a school-age child, maybe elementary school, maybe junior high, maybe even high school, but maybe before junior high is more potent. Something that was influential, that you just think was influential to who you are now, to things you value. Perhaps it was a teacher. Perhaps it was an experience that you got to do. Something that came to mind was someone that taught you something, maybe someone you valued, an adult or older person who shared something with you and you got to learn something and express yourself. So those are two examples. Maybe it was just somewhere where you found your own sense of courage or individuality or creativity. And similarly to the other two exercises, once you flesh that out as if it's happening right here, you create a virtual reality, you're right back there in that time, place, smells, colors, whoever else was there. And then give it some words, give it some phrases as if you're also listening with your body to do that. Does that phrase, do those words fit? And if you find yourself straining, relax a little. This is a practice, just a practice. It's just there's nothing concrete here, it evolves. And perhaps this is optional. You can linger in that. You can just stay with that feeling of something that was an influential piece of your personhood. And perhaps this optional piece is, does it appear in your current life in some way? And if it does, bring that to Technicolor, flesh that out to how that looks now. Perhaps it's a way that you continue to use your creativity or a connection to that person who may or not still be alive even. And then when you're ready, come back to touch base with that sense of caring that lives in you, even if it was expressed for another being. And then that sense of safety, combining, sort of listening to the physical, how it lives in your body, your heart, your mind. And a bell to shift us out of this practice. And this truly is a kind of, even though I didn't have you set up in a formal meditation seat, if you chose that, it's fine. But our mind is we're in a different, if somebody was to attach electrodes to our heads, there would be different kind of waves from that kind of activity that we just did. Probably different from just meditating because there was a lot of story doing in there. So yeah, do some stretching perhaps, or even get up and move before we sit again. So when we sit, I'm going to invite you, it'll be more of a meditation again. I'm going to invite you to bring that quality, that something that you attained as a child or a younger person, and feel that, and then let it go, sacrifice it. See if what would happen if you let it go. Because I think another aspect of the sacrifice is that I think in the story of Abraham and Isaac, if I'm remembering, you guys could help me maybe, is that he actually didn't end up having to sacrifice at all, right? So I don't know if you've felt that sometimes, and I think in meditation with this parallel is that when we let go of our thoughts, it's not that we don't have them or have access to our thoughts, but we get access to something so much bigger and richer, and we still need the thoughts. We need all that. Any questions? And those of you out there in the streamland can chat them to me, or any sharing of this experience. Did it feel okay? It's important that it feels safe. No question. No question. I think it's kind of fun, and it can be. I'm finding these very powerful things that can add to our understanding of now. Okay. All right. So let's take a few more moments just to move and stretch if you like. I'm gonna just move my body a little. Before we're still again. I was listening a little finally. I didn't get a chance. There's so much to listen to, but Annie and Teresa Murphy, who will be here this weekend, had a chat on Instagram. And so if you are on Instagram, you can go on Sun and Moon's feed, and under, I don't even know what the things are called, but maybe it's Reels, or it's got a little triangle like the play symbol. So there's only a few to choose from, but you can find Annie and Teresa talking about the practices she'll be sharing this weekend, and she brings a lot, her own rich practice, and is very integrated of these same kind of things, where she's really integrating the body practice with the heart, with the mind, and into that fullness. And anyway, check it out if you have time, or even just read the flyer. A lot of times that's very inspiring too, and that's an option for this weekend. So let's slide now into one more meditation, and you can reset up your seat or redecide. Maybe you'll take a different posture from the beginning one. And this will just be I think we'll do 8 minutes. And I'll start with a bell for this one, and I'll end with bell or bells. When if you choose to bow at the beginning and end, as you bring your hands together and bow your head and lift, attending to how that whole gesture feels, to really, the simple act of that we do so often in yoga of just bringing our attention to what we're doing, helps us to just feel what's true and fresh right here, and so trains our discernment, trains us to just be more available for what's needed and what's present right here. My teacher Russell says, have a good journey. Getting the felt sense of the bow, and then letting our hands rest purposefully, intentionally. Finding the contact of support with ground. And an ease of upward buoyancy, levity. Leaning into attending to sound or breath, partly as support for the practice, and partly as portals to being right here. This very showing up to our practice, this commitment, is a sacrifice of one kind. You might find more and more as we're sitting and intending just to let ourselves attend to just being here and breathing, the very simplicity. And when anything else arrives and pulls at our attention or completely takes us seemingly off course, to allow the space for that, as Annie says. Know that all that is part of that one kind of knowing that's always changing, absolutely essential and wonderful and necessary. And yet sink back into how any of that is held by that different, that other knowing, that boundless, ever renewing source. And you might take that same, I guess you'd call it a technique that we've used with our attention throughout this evening, of just noticing how that source of knowing, which really in a sense has no qualities, and yet there's a way we know when we're tapped into it. And while the words we would give that are not it, the felt sense of it is palpable, is real, happening right here. And just recognizing just recognizing. possibly a feel like you're home. So bringing your palms together in front of the heart, if that's feels a good way for you to end, or another gesture, you may take a different sort of bow. And so the bow as well can be, you can feel for yourself, is it a humility? Is it an ending and beginning? It can be a number of things, and what it feels like for us is valuable too. When Jackie and I would be on meditation retreats, and the sitting meditations would be, were 40-minute periods in the afternoon, and there were, I think, 20 or 4 half-hour breaks in between the 3 periods, and we were told even if we wanted to stay meditating, we could, but we had to stand up. I think we stood up and bowed. We stood up and bowed with the bell at the end of each one. We bowed at the beginning and then stood up and bowed. And then if you wanted to, you could stop again. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It was, in part, I think there might be many different reasons, as there are for all these practices, but one was that there's a time to have a practice and a time to get on with life. Like there's, you could choose on retreat. You didn't have to go back to life, so you could choose there and sit. Many of us wanted to go stretch our legs, but get a snack or water. But so the bow is really interesting in the various traditions. And then I love that most importantly, it's, what then as we learn, what do we feel that it is for us here now? So thank you for being here with me tonight. It's such an honor. Thank you, Annie, for asking me to sit in for you. And I love listening to Annie's talks. I usually listen later. So I'm really appreciative of this community. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who is out there joining us. And I'm going to end the stream. Come back next week. Annie will hopefully be here. Ciao, ciao. I think that